So we have a few minutes here, 20 minutes or so. What do you want to talk about? I've got an idea. That was a rhetorical question, by the way. Why don't we do the thing I prepared? And I want you to think of this as a children's story for grown-ups, because we have show and tell. And Debbie's going to be back there with the slides to help me. And as soon as she gets the first slide up, I'm going to start talking. So look at this happy high schooler. He's a Catholic boy in New York City in the middle of leading his team on a 71-game win streak at Power Memorial High School. Do you recognize his face? Well, you can't tell from the picture because he's seated, but he is already 7 feet tall. I stumbled on, there should be another slide up. There he is. Okay. That is Louis Alcindor, later to change his name to Kareem Abdul Jabbar. Okay, so I stumbled on this book, Coach Wooden and Me, our 50-year friendship on and off the court, when I was in the used bookstore at the Oaks Mall looking for Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And I guess most people know Kareem Abdul Jabbar is one of the best basketball players ever in the game, still the all-time scoring leader. And he was so dominant in his college days that after his first year, the NCAA changed a rule. They made the dunk shot illegal to prevent him from dominating games. It had little effect, though, because they went on to win 88 games with 2 losses. The reason he came to UCLA was because of the man he's standing next to there, who you also probably recognize as John Wooden. John Wooden was also a, yeah, there he is. So he was a star player at Purdue University, by the way, before he became a coach. And he's got the short shorts, the black sneakers, serious look. And the other reason I was drawn to this book, by the way, was because I was a basketball fan for many years during the Lakers era that Kareem played in. And I also coached kids, and in high school I actually played basketball. That's me. Notice that I haven't changed a bit. Turn. So to give you an idea of how good I was, I will tell you how many colleges came to recruit me. And that number would be 0. And you know what? It doesn't matter. I played the game. So not as many people are aware of Abdul Jabbar's post-basketball career as an author. In the years after basketball, he writes, I'd been on a crusade to bring more color to American history by writing books that celebrated achievements by African Americans that school textbooks conveniently overlooked. And now some people think Kareem is actually at a genius level in IQ. I had a friend that knew him for a time when he was at UCLA, and he said if he had been a foot shorter, he'd have been a college professor. And I tend to agree. He wrote books, such books as Black Profiles in Courage, about several influential blacks in American history, Brothers in Arms, about the all-black tank battalion in World War II, and On the Shoulders of Giants, my personal journey through the Harlem Renaissance. It may seem like an unlikely friendship, this middle-aged, white, Midwestern, conservative Christian man and the black Harlem hoopster who would later exchange his Catholicism for Islam. But they made it work for 50 years. This you will recognize as the ancient Chinese symbol of the yin-yang, which represents opposites opposite yet complementary forces in the natural world, male and female, light and dark, pain and joy. Notice that there is always, in that dot, there is always a bit of the one in the other. There's never a complete separation. For Taoists, there is a nameless order and flow to everything. Says Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, there was something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao, which often gets translated as the way. So the key to your well-being and mine is to find your place in the flow, in the way. Surfers know this. This is my friend Corey, surfing somewhere around Ventura. The ocean is far more powerful than any one little surfer. You must learn to cooperate, find your place in it. The waves come in sets. You can't just paddle out against the big waves whenever you want. You have to work with them. Wait patiently for the break in the sets. Then you have to merge with it and ride the wave at the right time, or else suffer the consequences. I learned this the hard way when I was 16, when I had a disagreement with a wave about the size of this one that nearly drowned me. There is flow like the ocean wave and everything. Says the Tao, there's a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, and a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. So earlier we did a meditative exercise that hopefully reminds us of the emotional and psychic waves that we learn every day to ride without being battered by them. I asked my son to do a drawing for me. My son, who has been sketching all his life. He did sketches like this. Well, he helped me build a couple houses, about 15 years ago. And I would sometimes call and say, Nathan, bring me 4 2x4s, 8 feet long. And I'd turn and look, and he would be sketching on a lumber that was already up. He really knew how to be in the moment. Unfortunately, I wished he was more often in my moment. But he's been sketching a long time, and I asked him to draw this. So, ecstasy. When's the last time you felt like this? Or a more modest, happy feeling? Or anger caused by something some other driver on the freeway did, or something your boss did, or something the president said or did yesterday, or today, every day. Or an email that you got at work that pisses you off. There's a lot to get angry over, isn't there? Or when did you feel like this? What is that? He's sad. Or like this. This is a even-keeled, contented face, and that's what I aim for right in the middle of the teeter-totter. But you notice all these people are on the board. They're all there, and you have to learn how to balance them, not let any one of them throw you off your game. I've learned I can make friends with all these human emotions. Breathe in, breathe out, watch them come, watch them go, and don't let them throw me off balance. Or maybe you feel like you're spending your day like this guy, walking on a steel bicycle rack, looking for just the right bush to fit into. I saw that on campus, and I thought, that's a leaf. That's a leaf on the rail. No, it's not. It's a leaf bug. Isn't that beautiful? I just had to share that. He's looking for his balance. So at one time, Kareem, and I think I'll just call him Kareem. I don't know him, but I sort of feel like I do. A fellow traveler on this introspective, introverted, intellectual life. At one time, Kareem had one of the most extensive vinyl jazz collections in the country. Then in 1983, a fire happened at his house and burnt it and all his collection. Thanks to the generosity of hundreds of basketball fans, that collection was not only restored, but surpassed the original. You may have a loss, but not have hundreds of thousands of basketball fans around the country to help you out. And this is Miles Davis, one of Kareem's favorite jazz musicians, a genius who could make a solo with a single note. One day, Kareem wanted to share his passion for jazz with his friend, the coach. He said, "Have you ever realized that the way we played basketball at UCLA was a form of jazz? You taught us to play basketball jazz." "It's true," he said to a puzzled John Wooden. "Both require a kind of structured freedom. You didn't teach us to run set plays with diagrams and arrows. Instead, you taught us how to react to the other players in the middle of motion. We soloed here and there, expressed our individuality, but all within the framework of what other players were doing. We soloed or played backup for one another, but we always played the same song, like a jazz band." And it reminds me of finding the flow in the Tao and my need to harmonize with my environment, my community, my world. Jazz takes place someplace beyond the conscious mind, Kareem said. Then the epiphany hit him. He realized that despite both he and the coach liking strict structure in their lives, Coach and I had been playing a jazz duet of friendship. He was the old, wiser master, blowing complex combinations of notes, and I was, and always would be, the upstart kid, eager to learn, but with his own song to play. I can remember those times on a basketball court myself, rare but real, where thought vanished and action flowed from the unconscious, where the ball in my hand and the basket seemed linked, shooting without aiming, where muscle memory and the motion of the moment congealed in some kind of dance, where I was as much an observer as a participant. On occasion, I felt the same with my guitar or with other musicians. Like it says in Zen in the Art of Archery, a book that Kareem mentions and that inspired so many people to research Zen and even write a novel about it and motorcycles. After years of practice, the archer no longer thinks about the bow or the arrow or the bullseye because their body takes over unconsciously. The author, Eugene Herrigel, talks about he learned archery for 6 years in the 20s in Japan from a Zen master. And he talks about how difficult it was just to control the bow until the master one day said, "That's because you're breathing the wrong way." "Well, why didn't you tell me to begin with?" "Well, you had to learn yourself. Now you'll appreciate it." And then the loosing of the arrow, again, couldn't get it right. He was doing better before he tried to relax his hand to shoot. But eventually, he learned the trick, which was to use great force, but in a relaxed, loose manner. And we'll come back to that in a minute later. One of my favorite books in the Bible is the book of Ecclesiastes. At its root is the story of an extremely conspicuous consumer of all things material and intellectual, all the things the ego thinks it needs to survive. Put in the voice of the super-rich King Solomon it begs the question, how much is enough? The answer is, there is never enough to satisfy the craving of the ego. There were no limits to the pleasures he indulged in. He pursued knowledge, possessions, and in the end determines all his striving and winning is unsatisfactory. Vanity of vanity, emptiness. All was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Turn, turn, turn. I've read this book since I was a teenager, and I think I finally get it. His trouble is that he is focusing on outcomes, not process. Kareem writes, the biggest misconception that people have about Coach Wooden is thinking that he's focused on winning. He did not. Despite being one of the winningest coaches in basketball, he did the opposite. Hard work is the goal. The reward is satisfaction that you pushed yourself to the edge, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Then winning is usually inevitable. Coach's reactions to wins and losses were instructive. They were the same. His expression and demeanor were the same, whether they won or lost. And I love this story that Kareem tells. He was a coach at Indiana State from 1946 to 48. Then he moved to UCLA in 48, and he won his first NCAA championship in 1964, 18 years after his coaching career began and 16 years after coming to UCLA. So once while sitting in a restaurant, Kareem and the coach see this thin man with a wry smile come up. And he says, I was just wondering why it took you so long to win your first national championship. Coach says, I admit I am a slow learner, but you notice that when I learn something, I have it down pretty good. So Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art, another book I recommend, talks about the ego and the self from Carl Jung's perspective. The ego, Jung tells us, is that part of the psyche that we think of as I, our conscious intelligence, our everyday brain that thinks, plans, and runs the show of our day-to-day life. The self, as Jung defines it, is a greater entity which includes the ego, but also incorporates the personal and collective unconscious. Dreams and intuitions come from the self. Creativity comes from the self. The archetypes of the unconscious live there. It is, Jung believed, the sphere of the soul. The ego's job is to take care of business in the real world. It's an important job that we couldn't have a day without. But there are other worlds where the ego is of no help and will actually hinder us. So think of yourself in that yin-yang, that big circle, and where do you fit, and how do you do it? That's the realm of the self. Here are some ways the ego and self part ways. The ego believes every individual is different and separate from every other. I am distinct from you. The twain shall never meet. I can hurt you, and it won't hurt me. The self believes all things, all beings are one. If I hurt you, I hurt myself. The ego believes death is real, that our existence is defined by our physical flesh. The self believes death is an illusion. The soul endures and evolves through infinite manifestations. The ego believes the predominant impulse of life is self-preservation. Because our existence is physical and thus vulnerable to innumerable evils, we live and act out of fear in all we do. The self believes the supreme emotion is love. Union and mutual assistance are the imperatives of life. We are all in this together, which is why we chose that beautiful book, Love This Morning, as it shows the myriad ways that you can find love and see it in other people and experiences. Flowing with the Tao happens in the self. So that's Humpty Dumpty. You know what happens. And he's already got his cracks in his shell. That's high up on a picture frame in my kitchen. It reminds me of how fragile life is. There is a Zen saying, the vase is already broken. What it means is all pottery is fragile and made to be broken. None has been made that will live forever. Once you accept that, you can enjoy it without anxiety born of the need to protect it indefinitely. Now, the next set of slides I'm going to show you, I was going to remove last night because they are so personal. But I left them in hoping that you can see yourself in these grains of sand, as William Blake said, and see your own challenge to hold on while letting go. Would you like to meet the artist who did the teeter-totter? Well, here he is. Nathan brought this home when he was in college. It was an art project in a class. And I said, who is it? What is it? And he says, I think it's me in my new place. So I always think of it as Nathan's self-portrait. Would you like to see his actual face? So what is he, 2 months, 3 months old? Look at his legs. They can't do anything. So plump. But he's got the face of a Buddha. And here he is, getting a hug or a choke from his sister. He is the middle child. Here he is giving a brother hug to the next baby that was born. Then the brothers grow up. And I remember each of these moments thinking, can't I just keep this a little longer? They're so perfect now. I want to hold this a little longer, just a little longer, but of course you cannot. So then the boy learns to play basketball. That's his dad, his skinny dad. Look how high he got. That's Debbie's photograph, won second place at the Ventura County Fair. Then the baby, the artist, becomes a teenager. I have many more, even more petulant faces than that. But I decided to give him a break. And then eventually he has a family of his own. There he is on the left. And once again, I find myself saying, these are my grandchildren. Can't I just keep them that way a little longer? They're so perfect right now. But you know, you eventually learn to let go of everything and accept that every moment is perfect. So I'm going to switch to the artist's grandmother, my mother. There she is, different kind of dress, another angelic face, who eventually goes to school and graduates. That's her graduation picture in Superior, Wisconsin. She learns to play the piano. There she is in the radio station doing a gospel program. Then she marries this guy. And before you know it, this happens. I'll let you figure out which one I am. So she gets to travel. There she is in Greece. She's older now, middle-aged, definitely. And then after her husband dies, in 1986, she takes a trip to Norway, her mother's homeland. And I'm sorry the washed out picture, or the picture is so washed out, but she's on a boat on a fjord in Norway. And I had to slip this one in. 26 years later, there's Debbie and I on another fjord in Norway, letting the wind blow us into that moment. So, the artist's grandmother grows old. There she is in my house that I built next to a stained glass that Debbie built. And she's 86. It's July 2001. She's probably got cancer. We don't know it. But either that, she got it really fast, because here she is, 4 days after 9/11, a day that we got the diagnosis. And finally, here's the artist saying goodbye. And my beautiful mother putting on a brave face. So I hope you can all see yourselves. You know, we had a beautiful service last week, giving a send-off to Pamela's mother, Sidel. And we have another member who's doing the same with her mother right now. And we are all in the story. And I love these moments. And I know that I can't hold any of them. And I know there is no life without death. It's part of the circle, the yin and the yang. And I do not fear it. So Kareem Abdul Jabbar was on his way out of Poly Pavilion, doing his power walk, as he called it, which he uses when he wants to get home, because he knows if he pauses for a moment, he'll get hats and brochures put in front of him, and he'll be signing autographs for an hour or two, which he does many, many times. But sometimes I just want to be home, he says. So he was doing his power walk, and he heard a voice call faintly, "Kareem, can you help me out?" And he knew the coach needed actual help with some support. And so he's walking his friend home. From the Tao Te Ching, if you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. If you stay in the center and embrace death with your whole heart, you will endure forever. To everything there is a season, a time to be born, a time to die. So just as the archer must learn to hold a grip that is at once firm and relaxed, I must learn to hold and release all things that come into my way. Material possessions, experiences, people. Detachment does not mean not caring or holding your dear loved ones. On the contrary, it means loosening the deathly grip of the ego that is so unwilling to accept the ever-changing ebb and flow of the way, so that you can love freely and completely with your whole self. So, over 50 years, student and master, author, and support for his old friend. In the children's book, Cry Heart But Never Break, it says, "What would life be if there were no death? Who would enjoy the sun if it never rained? Who would yearn for day if there were no if there were no night?" So this is me in my highest aspiration, an even expression a contentment, a joy in every single moment. The ups and the downs, the joy, the sorrow, the hurt, the pleasure. A child is born, the old must die, a time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. And I think, Dana, it's time for us to rise, and we're going to sing Let It Be a Dance.